Poddin My Noggin, hosted by CK Sims, creating a platform to elevate, educate, and heal by creating a space where people can share their stories of struggle, triumph, and redemption. CKS Media.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Poddin My Noggin. Today is a special day. One being that today I will have my first repeat guest on the show. And two, we're going to be talking about a really cool project. This guest being Mr. Matt O'Neill. Welcome back, Matt.
What's up, CK?
Getting ready for the holidays and all the madness that ensues with that. How have you been? It's been a few months.
Yeah, I've been up and down.
Up and down, okay. Fair. You know what? That's really fair. So, you want to talk about that?
Yeah. So today I'm up, and that's a really good thing. And but this is kind of part of life too. It's that we're not always up, and that's the reason I wrote the book, The Good Mood Revolution, is that there are days that we're down.
Absolutely.
And in the holidays, a lot of times in the holidays, people get down, and
Yes.
it's like it's the most wonderful time of the year, except for when it's not, and it's overwhelming, and there's so much to do, and there's so much pressure and so many demands, and you got to see these people that you haven't seen in a while, and there's kind of old roles that come up and all that stuff that happens. And
yes, the old roles. That's a very interesting and insightful call out, right? Because it's the argument that people freeze you in a time capsule, right? So the Curtis who was 8 and misbehaved and was rambunctious and the entertainment is now the same Curtis at 43. So you grow as a human, but your family often doesn't think that you are capable of said change.
Yeah, but you've evolved so much, man.
Yes.
Think about this. And, almost 40 years, there's so much growth. And yet we do kind of fall back into these roles. You're now the age of your dad at one point. And,
yes.
And yet you'll just show up and you'll still be the little kid. And that's an interesting way to be. And so a lot of times during these holiday times, people do get really stressed out and it becomes an unhappy time. We just got done with Thanksgiving, one of my favorite holidays, maybe my very favorite holiday, because it's all about giving thanks.
There we go.
And we flew across the country to spend time with my little brother and his family. And it was great. It was Washington State. So very cold. I'm sure similar to the climate that you're in.
Yes.
Beautiful. Like the forest was beautiful. We put the hats and the mittens on and we all went outside. But of course I drank too much. And that's kind of some of the old roles too, is that my brother and I got together and we partied like we did when we were younger. And then, this is part of the reason the holidays can be a bummer, is that then there's these hangovers and there's the come down from that. And then, so yesterday my wife and I are like, oh, we got to put the tree up. We got to decorate the tree. Oh, we got to decorate the house. And we like, kids, decorate the stuff with us. And we just felt overwhelmed. And I'm like, Katie, this isn't any fun right now. She's like, I'm not having any fun. And I'm like, what can we do to have fun? And she's like, I don't know. All the joy is gone. And so I'm just being honest, right? And this is supposed to be a really joyful time, decorating the tree and decorating the house and getting ready for this really joyous time. And so I wake up this morning and I want to get it back. I want to get the joy back. I want to feel my best today. And I sat there with a cup of coffee and my journal and my pen, and I just started to write down all the reasons that I might not be feeling so joyful. And, I felt like a lot of it was just chemical. Like, hey, I overindulged. And I sometimes call when you overindulge with drugs or alcohol or whatever it is, you steal the joy from the future and you use it that night. So
Absolutely, though. Yeah.
I was stealing the future joy, and we paid the price for it. And so, I made some healthy decisions today. And this is what's in my control. What's in my control is to make some healthy decisions. So I committed to a nutritionist. I reached out to him. I said, hey, I want to bring you on as my nutritionist full time. Could I hire you? Would you take me on as your client? And he said, of course, I'd love to have you as a client. So that was a commitment to a very healthy lifestyle, which is totally in counter to the unhealthy, activities that I just done the week before. And then that made me feel good. Like I'm making a choice to nurture myself, to take care of myself, and then to be my best self.
Mm-hmm.
And from that choice, now I'm starting to feel kind of empowered. And I'm like, all right, what else could I do? I'm like, well, there's this huge Christmas shopping thing, and I had some things to buy. So this morning, after I made that choice to hire the nutritionist, I went ahead and I bought Katie's gifts online, the ones that I could get. And it felt good, just doing those two little things. Hiring the nutritionist was kind of big, but getting some Christmas shopping done was a little thing, but it was something that...
A little win.
Yeah, it was a win. It was a win, totally. And so then now I was kind of on a roll. And this is how positive momentum can work. And on this roll, I had an idea come to me about the real estate company that I'm operating. And I thought, man, one of the things we could really use is a training on scripting for my agents. So I reached out to somebody who's really good at that. And I said, hey, would you do training on Wednesdays for my agents on scripting? And she said, that's like a great idea. And so I set up this meeting, and now there's this enthusiasm at the company, and I'm showing up, and all these people are showing up. And this is it. I call it like an upward spiral. We all know what a downward spiral is. And Katie and I were kind of in that this weekend as we were in that funk, and we were, like just being with our kids for 7 straight days. We have 4 of them. They're great. They're wonderful kids, but 7 straight days, in an airplane with them, flying across country, coming back. It's a lot sometimes. And we needed a little bit of a reset. And I got that this morning. And so that's what I mean when I say the up and down. But this is the good mood revolution. It's like sometimes there's the down. We have to admit it. And then I just don't want to stay in it. I want to get out of it when I can.
So would you say that maybe this past week turned the notch up on your upper limits thermostat?
Man, look at you with all this terminology. Yeah, I think that I don't think that I hit an upper limit.
Okay.
I think that I alcohol induced a higher limit.
There you go.
And that's not a sustainable limit, and
I feel like there's balance, right? So
yeah.
I think the key thing is that we're talking about how life is about ups and downs. And yes, you borrowed future joy to spend time with your brother, and you were in a funk from it. But in my mind, how often do you get to spend time with your brother? So you borrowed some future joy. You were in a funk. You were a little bit low, you and Kate, with the Christmas tree and all that stuff. But then as you're telling me this story, I'm thinking to myself, I'm like, okay, you made the choice. You had your joy. You feel a little bit low, but now we're back up today. And I think that the pressure of it's December 1st or December 2nd, we have to get the tree up. We have to do this. We have to decorate. I think that there's almost too much automation in our lives sometimes that lead to feeling overwhelmed. Did you have to put the tree up yesterday, right? Could it wait a day? Could it be, you know what? We don't feel like this right now. We're not having joy in this moment. Could we take a beat and come back at another time? And I think that that's a part of what that overwhelming thing is that we just apply so much pressure and so much automation that we should be doing this, should be doing that all the time. But yes, so my point is that you were in a low, and I get that, and I respect that. But at the same time, you were with your brother, and you had fun in that moment. I do like that thought, though, that you're stealing future joy in that moment, right? Because there are consequences.
There are. I wish there weren't. Wouldn't it be great if you could just party and there was zero consequence? But it's kind of nice because there are consequences. If there weren't, we all would just party all the time.
Well, we chase the feeling of
over,
happiness the wrong way, if you
yeah,
will,
yeah,
right?
over and over and over and over, because there'd be no consequence. So it's kind of nice that there is that consequence, because that's an unhealthy lifestyle too. To overindulge on a very consistent basis.
I would agree. Now, for me at 43, I know that if I'm going to drink, it's going to take at minimum 3 to 4 days for me to get back to my baseline.
Wow. Me too.
Right?
Me too. I agree with you. I
If
agree. I think it did when we were younger too, but maybe we didn't notice it. I might
I,
just be more in tune.
I don't know. I'm sure it had its effects, but I think when we were younger, we just had more energy, higher metabolism.
Mm,
Like it, I remember being young and going out on all night benders and then getting up and going to work the next day, still
right.
partially drunk, probably.
Right.
So but I just, when I think of it now, I can have so much fun without alcohol. I'm
Yeah.
not opposed to drinking. I'm not opposed to anybody having a drink, whatever. But it's like, okay, I always decide I'm making the choice to have these drinks, knowing that the next 4 days are going to be pretty much right off, mood wise, energy wise, physically. I'm going to feel ill, right?
Yeah. I didn't drink for 5 years because of
Wow.
exactly what you're saying. And I just brought it back this year. And yeah, I didn't have a drink for 5 straight years. And then and I did that when my kids were really young. So we've got, at that time the kids were like 5, 3, and 1. Those are young ages, and I just wanted to. I didn't want to not have the energy to be dad. I wanted to the next day to wake up and take them to the park and like go to their games and like be excited to be there. And I found myself I was more excited for Friday night than I was for Saturday morning. And I'm like, I want to flip flop this. I want to be more excited for Saturday morning than anything else in my week. And so I just one day I decided I wasn't going to have a drink, and then it just that week rolled into the next, and then into the next, into the next, and then eventually it was just a lifestyle. And I felt amazing, and my relationship with my kids grew. My relationship with my wife grew. I was still going out with my friends. I just was having non-alcoholic drinks as they were having alcoholic drinks, and there was no issue with that. And then I went out to dinner with my wife, and she was ordering a glass of wine, and I said, I'm going to get a glass of wine. And she was like
What?
shocked,
Yeah.
right? And so now I'm playing with this thing where I'm like, all right, can I do this without it being a big deal, and without doing what I just did this past week, where I'm drinking too much, too many days in a row, and I have to go down through this lull, because when you're not drinking at all, you don't experience that.
No, you don't.
That's the positive, is you don't have the down
But
because you didn't get the super high up.
I haven't been on what I would say a binger, if you will, for, oh gosh, at least 5, 6 years. But if I go out to dinner, especially with my aunt, I will always have a strawberry daiquiri.
Mm,
Just,
sounds
just,
great.
just the
Sounds
one.
great.
Just the one. And I love strawberry daiquiris. And what I like about having the one drink is that you just get a little bit warm and you get like a little tiny little buzz, but it's nothing where you're not yourself or you feel uninhibited or something like that. It's just a little feel good, tastes
Yep.
good. It's celebratory with your meal, and then that's that. And I don't go out to eat that often, so it's really rare occasions. But that is something I enjoy doing because it's just a social thing to do and enjoy.
So here we are, it's like the holiday season. We overindulge. We
Yes.
overeat. There's all these cakes. There's all these candies that show up. There's all these parties. So because we're going out to more parties, we're having more alcohol, we're having more food that we don't typically eat. And then people end up feeling kind of bad. Everybody gets sick. They blame it on the cold. They're like, oh, the cold weather. This is why I got sick. What if it's not the cold weather? What
What
if
if
it's
it's how
just
we treat ourselves, our bodies,
totally,
right? I
yeah.
have a rule of thumb. Just I'll share with you, and I shared this with my bestie a few years ago, and I think she now lives by that. If I'm feeling angry, it means I need to eat. If I feel any other emotion, like low or just kind of like in a meh mood, my rule is just add water. And it's kind of something I live by. So the first thing I do is when my mood dips in any way, shape, or form, because I think, am I hungry? When was the last time I ate? Or two, how much water have I drank today? And typically it always will come back to, I have not drank water in like 2.5, 3 hours. I need to go have a little glass and like replenish.
That's crazy. So this nutritionist I just brought on, I was telling you about, he has me eating 7 meals a day.
I believe it. Yeah, small ones, right?
Mm-hmm. Seven small meals a day. And the point is not to lose muscle mass.
Yes.
And that your body knows what to do with the nutrients if you feed it the right amount and the right nutrients. And it's a lot of whole fruits and whole vegetables and good grains and good protein and not the junk. But he also has me drinking 120 ounces of water a day, which is so hard to do. That's a tremendous amount of water.
I don't find that hard. So this is a 32 ounce and I drink at least 4 to 5 of these a day.
That's what, yeah, it would take 4 of those a day. That's, for me, that's a lot of water. Yeah, but apparently our bodies work better when we're drinking the water that you drink. And you're saying that improves your mood too.
Oh my gosh. Game changer.
Dude, this is awesome.
Yeah.
So our mood could drop when we're unhealthy. And it's supposed to be this like the happiest time of year. What if the person listening to this show, rather than waiting till January to do their New Year's resolution, is like, all right, I'm going to set some resolutions here in December.
There you go.
And I'm going to make some healthy choices this month so that I'm rolling through the holidays with the healthiest choices I can, feeling my best, not waiting until January to try to reset and get back on track. Then by the time I hit January, I hit it in stride. I always do goal planning in December. I just do.
You do goal planning a lot, though.
Yeah.
Right? I have a tip for people who are listening. Usually in December, and I don't know why I say it. I think it's because I'm from Newfoundland, but I say December as opposed to December. But anyway, if you normally in December, our sugar intake increases. So to counteract the increased sugar is we need to drink more water. And that flushes out that sugar quicker from our systems. Water is God, right? God is water. So if we were filled with water, we are filled with God. That's my religious take on that. But anyway.
Well, yeah, I mean, if you think about it, 70% of the earth is water.
Right?
70% of our body is water. 70% of what we take in should probably be water.
Probably, yes. And just like a plant, when you see it drying or wilting or any of those things, just add water. That is my rule to life. Now,
so I was at lunch today, and I was with one of my good friends, and she's like, Matt, are you ever not on? Like, we've known each other for 10 years, and I'm like, I've accomplished a lot of things in 10 years. And she's like, are there ever times when you're just not, just being you and like going for something bigger or doing something to become better? And I'm like, yeah, of course. Of course there are. Of course there's times that I'm falling down, and there's times that I'm like, I got my head down, and there's times I'm not feeling enthusiastic. And she's like, well, what do you do? She said, because I'm kind of in a rut right now. Like I'm kind of in a rut. And she's having a really successful year, and she's telling me that she's kind of in a rut. And this was after, like, she's telling me all these great things that are going on. She's reconnected with one of her daughters. She just had the biggest sale of her career. She's a real estate agent. And she's got great friends. She took a trip to New Zealand. She took a trip to Africa, like really a terrific, like you would look at this and you'd say, this is an incredible life. And how could she be in a rut? Well, it's because that's what happens sometimes, right? It's just life. Even if things go well, we can still feel like we're in a rut. And I said, well, here's what I do whenever I'm in a rut. I say, no matter what's happened in my past, no matter how great it's been, my future needs to be bigger. And this can feel daunting or intimidating to us. So I took her through an exercise, and I did it with her because I love to do this stuff. And we sat there at lunch, and I had a piece of paper and a pen. And I said, I want you to think back over the last 10 years. In the last 10 years, write down the biggest and best things that have happened to you. What are the biggest and best things? Well, how have you grown? How have you become more? And and if you're listening to this, you can feel free to play along, and you can think about, so 10 years ago, I'm in my 30s, and we had 2 kids, and we lived in this house. It was really great. And I was my company was doing pretty well. And, think about who you were and how old you were, and what was going on in your life at that point. And then think about, in the coming 10 years, all the things that have happened. So in my life, my business doubled, and then it doubled again. And then we had another child, and then we had another child, and then we built a house, and then we built an office building. And then I started the podcast, and I wrote a book. Like, you start to think about all these things. You're like, wow, man, I can't believe what I've done in 10 years. And this is a really important piece of this goal setting process. And most people miss this point, is that we go to like set our goals or set our resolution, and we usually do it from a place of lack. We usually say, oh, I'm not in the shape I want to be in, or I don't have the income I want. So I'm going to set a goal to get the income, and I'm going to set a goal to be the weight that I want. And it's coming from a place of lack, instead of abundance. When we do it this way, which is what I did with my friend today at lunch, and we say, look how great we've been. And it's like doing a greatest hits album, one of your favorite bands that's been around a long time, they do greatest hits, and it's a great album because every single song is like, oh, I love that song. Well, that's our life too. We think about back on 10 years, you could have the greatest hits of your last 10 years. And looking at these lists, so I had my list and she had her list, and I'm like, wow, like, you've been so amazing. Now imagine this. All of that was just a warm up, and that your greatest 10 years is yet to come. And that given what all that you've just accomplished, if that was just the start of what you're capable of, what could you do in the next decade? And so from that place, we were like, wow, okay, now what could I do? And this is the idea. You want your future to be bigger than your past. No matter how old you are, no matter what's going on in your life, you want your future to be bigger than your past. And so my friend looked at me, and we wrote for a while. I'm like, just free form write. What could you do in the next decade? And we get done, and she's got a full page of stuff. And I said, all right, now what on that list excites you the most? What really lights your heart on fire? And she looks at me and she's like, paying off my house in the next 10 years. I'm going to pay off my house. I'm not going to have a house payment. And I'm like, what would that feel like to not have a house payment? And she's like, oh, it'd feel amazing. I said, I'm a Dave Ramsey fan, and my family and I had the opportunity to pay off our house, and we did this past year. And I said, this is what we did when we did it. I grabbed all my family around. We all held hands. And I said, now I want you to scream at the top of your lungs, because the bank does not own you. We own this place. No one can take it. And we jumped up and down and we screamed. And it was like one of the greatest moments of my whole life when we paid off our house. And I'm like, and I shared that story with her, and she's like, oh my God, I'm going to do that with my family when I accomplish this goal. And then now the enthusiasm is starting to go, like this upward spiral that I was talking about. She said, I'm going to pay off this house in 5 years. I'm like, oh, you just halved your goal. She's like, you know what? No, I'm going to do that. I'm going to pay off this house in the next 4 years. And I'm like, okay, like that's kind of a lot. This is kind of a lot. She said, well, I owe $200,000. I'm about to get Social Security. I'm just going to pretend like I never get it. That's going to go straight into this. I'm going to set my goal for my career just a little bit bigger than I was thinking. So see, what happened is she set one goal, and then that starts to direct everything else. This was just an hour ago. We just had this lunch, and you leave in a meeting like that when somebody was in a rut and then now feels on fire, and it puts you on fire. And so I wanted to share that story as we're getting into the new year, and we're talking about goal setting, because anytime I am feeling in a rut, I just start to say, my future is not bigger than my past. What do I need to do to make my future bigger than what I've just been doing? For me right now, that has been hiring this nutritionist. I've been healthy, but I haven't optimized my health. Bringing that guy on yesterday or this morning, like it's going to transform the way that I feel, and I'm really excited about it.
I love this. And what's interesting too is that I think, to break it down, you're making goals from gratitude, right? That's where you're putting yourself at. If you're looking at your future is going to be greater than your past, and then you accumulate or you write down, record all of the cool things that's happened in the last 10 years, you are in fact showing gratitude to the universe that you've achieved these things. Now, how do we achieve greater in the next 10 years? Like it's just manifesting 101, essentially, is what it is. Which I want to point out, because you were talking, and we're going to go for break in a moment, but you had said that your friend had been in a rut. And I think that I smiled. And I hope if this person watches that, I'll explain as to why I was smiling. Because I was smiling because I too this year have been in a rut. And yet, this has probably been one of the most phenomenal years of my entire life. So, just doing better than I ever have. I've done a lot of really wonderful things, gotten to do a lot of wonderful things, like things that 10 years ago, that Curtis would have been like, that's not possible. It's never going to happen. But here we are. And I think it's important to note that you can be having the very best year and still feel like you're not okay, or you're not jiving appropriately or whatever. And that is exactly where I was when I read this book. So we're going to take a quick break. And when we get back, we're going to get into this book. And I'm actually going to read aloud the email that I sent to Matt O'Neill after I closed the last page of this book. We'll be right back.
Life in Stitches by C.K. Sims. Available for purchase in paperback and ebook on all major platforms. Partner today with CK Sims and Poddin My Noggin to get in front of an audience that cares. You will be supporting mental health stories, tales of resilience, and uplifting content, aligning your brand with bringing goodness, authenticity, and kindness front and center. This spot could be yours. Do you have a story of struggle and resilience? One that you want to share with others and possibly help someone through their own struggles? Find the link in the show description and fill out the guest form today.
Welcome back, everybody. Before the break, we were talking to Matt O'Neill about life and goal setting, and setting goals from gratitude, really. Definitely check that out if you're just tuning in. I want to read you an email. We are having Matt here today about his book, Good Mood Revolution. Okay? And I want to set this up for everybody. Matt was on the show a few months ago, and we talked about this book. And then Matt was so kind to send me an email and said, I have advanced reader copies. Can I send you one? He also wrote me, which I thought was, this has never happened before, and I will never forget, you're the first person who actually signed a book for me. So just this alone was such a warm, fuzzy feeling.
Well, I do love your podcast.
Well, and I love your book, so we're going to talk about it. So anyway, I get the book, and we had really good rapport right from day one. Like when we started chatting, our energy was good. I think I told you that you have life in your eyes. You can see that light in your eyes, if I remember correctly. which wasn't me trying to hit on you, but was just calling out something that was obvious in the moment. But so the book came, and I remember putting it on my table, and I was just so busy in life. And I was in a rut. I was in a really crappy mood, man. Just a little woe is me, harboring some resentment towards certain things, having some inner struggles and anger. Like, oh my gosh, it was not a great experience. And there were I was very overwhelmed. And I remember seeing the book. I wanted to read it, but at the same time, I was like, it was another thing on my list of things to do, right? So I'm going to read the email that I sent to Matt. It was a Sunday morning, and we'll take it from there. So, Matt, happy blessed Sunday. The most peculiar and spellbinding thing happened to me today. If I'm being honest, I have been having a particularly moody few months. Work is heavy, obligations are heavy, and energy has been low. A whole gamut of egoistic things, really. I committed to making a few quilts this year for loved ones I sew, and they have become a bit of a chore. That was what today was scheduled for. However, after coffee and my morning reflection, I just felt that my heart wasn't in it today, and I needed to do something that always helped me feel grounded and centered. Read. It just happened that this book, Good Mood Revolution, was sitting on my kitchen table. I thought, I'll read for an hour or two and then reassess how I want to finish out my day. It wasn't, and this wasn't in the email, but I just want to add that it wasn't like a crime thriller or something like that. So I didn't think that it was going to grab me like a crime thriller would. Well, I read your book in a single sitting. I experienced the progression. Matt, I won't deny that God wasn't involved in our connection, or that he wasn't involved in the book being read at perfect timing. It is a beautifully crafted and written guide, and I love the vulnerability and lessons you highlighted within it. Lessons I needed just in time today, and reminders of things I already knew but drifted away from. Of course, there were many pieces I already knew, but it was the presentation and organized flow that resonated with me. The book itself was a journey, not a boring one, but thought-provoking and reaffirming. It forced me to reflect and recalibrate, giving me renewed perspective on items that have been occupying my brain space. The acts of love is how I bring myself into the present. The acts of reading is how I bring myself into the present. Okay, so then I didn't realize it was this long. Geez, okay. I meant every word. A few things that really stood out for me. So I want to talk about, I mentioned this earlier in the podcast. So the Upper Limits Thermostat, it was really cool to read about an experience I have had many times over the past 8+ years. So I won't read all that. What initially appeared?
Let's talk about it. Can we first of all, your email, like, it made my whole day. Like, I was like, oh dude, this is the best. It was the coolest. It was so specific. And because it was so specific, I knew that I went to write this book. It took me 4 years. I wrote it 7 times.
And that's crazy to me because it reads like like I'm having a conversation with you. I think that's what the surprise was, is how you set this up. And it really brings you through, like, I get goosies. I'm getting goosies thinking about it because I was in such a not great place. And then the book really it brings you through. I can't state it enough that it brings you through the full progression. So you start off in the bad moods. You talk about the bad moods, which is exactly where I was and could see myself.
Let's talk about the upper limits though, because that's a really interesting thing. And the concept of this upper limits threshold, I heard it first in college. I went to Western Michigan University, and I took the required health and fitness class, or as a freshman you have to take certain classes, and one of the classes was this like general health class. And the professor gets up and she said, there is a thermostat for your weight. And she said, if you add a few pounds, you have a thermostat. Let's say your weight is typically 180. And if you get up to 190, you'll do something to get back to 180. But if for some reason you drop to 170, you'll get back to 180, and that you're always going to hover around this 180 because that's your thermostat. She said it's very difficult to change your weight thermostat. And that stuck with me. And I kind of noticed it happen. I would see people then over the years that would lose a bunch of weight and they would feel so excited, like, oh, I lost 30 pounds. I'm like, oh, it's amazing. And then, the 30 pounds would come back and they wouldn't talk about it. And I was like, oh, that's just the thermostat in play. And the idea there, the reason that this is such a prevalent thing is that we have an image of ourselves and who we are. And this self-image is I'm this weight. And if it's a little bit overweight, it's a little bit overweight. If it's, a little bit underweight, maybe it's a little bit underweight, but we got a self-image. Well, this is the same thing with our emotions, is that we have an image of how much happiness we're allowed to feel. And it's like, I know for a fact, my brother is a curmudgeon. Not the brother I just went to see at Thanksgiving, but my older brother, he's a curmudgeon. And he has a persona and an image to uphold that he's a curmudgeon. And so he just doesn't want himself to experience a lot of joy or express a lot of happiness because it would go against his image. Well, this thermostat idea now starts to play out and you're like, well, what is my happiness thermostat? And I'm like, wow, I actually have one too. We all do. We all only allow ourselves to feel a certain amount of happiness because too much of it is outside of our image. Like I can't just be that person that's beaming happy all the time. That wouldn't be okay. People would think I was weird. I don't want to be weird. I want to fit in with society. So when I get too happy, here's what I'll do. I'll sabotage my happiness in some way so that I come back down and I have maybe some mood swings like I talked about to begin this show. Maybe I will drink too much subconsciously to overdo it. And then so that then I have the crash and then my wife and I are get into an argument over Christmas tree lights and our kids are upsetting us. And then I got to get myself back on track. Maybe all of that was part of the happiness thermostat. And that idea was really mind-blowing to me when I applied it to happiness. And it came from a guy named Gay Hendricks who wrote the book, The Big Leap. And I'm like, okay, how do we raise it? And we raise it, and this is the interesting thing, we raise it when we notice we're about to sabotage it. So we can consciously make a choice to say, all right, I'm going to lose the 10 pounds and I'm going to keep it off. But we only keep it off when we change our self-image. If we lose 10 pounds and then we say, this is who I am, that old one is no longer me. It never will be me again. That is something that is gone. I now have a new self-image of this weight. This is and we reinforce it with a lot of reinforcement. We have to. Same thing with the upper limits of happiness. Is that as we go to sabotage and we say, I'm not allowed to be this happy for this long. And we're like, oh, it kind of feels uncomfortable. Things have been going good for too long. The other shoe's got to drop sometime. Is to say, oh, I know that feeling. That feeling says that there's about to be a bunch of fireworks behind my head.
Yes, you're on the Mac. I can see.
And it's perfect. Like, you're about to blow up, right? You're about to blow up your happiness. It was perfect timing for that. And you say, okay, I know what I'm going to do. I'm going to do something that will sabotage the joy. I'm going to ruin my peace. I'm going to ruin this joy, but I'm not going to today. Today, I'm going to allow myself to be happy for just a day longer. Can I just let this day happen without sabotaging it? And then we do. And we wake up the next day and we're like, nothing happened. I'm still happy. Could I do one more day? Could we just go one more day where something wrong is going to happen? I know something's going to happen and I'm not going to like it, but could I just be happy through this day? And this is how we start to extend this happiness thermostat without without sabotaging it. So that's my explanation on it.
The last 8 years has been me turning up the dial on the upper limits thermostat. It literally has been. And for the longest time, I too thought the other shoe was going to drop, right? And I think throughout my journey of, putting this into words, the upper limits thermostat, and increasing my happiness level and that sort of thing, I've come to learn and recognize that life is a mixture of ups and downs, and you can choose happiness in both. And for me, I remember the reason my life was crap before 35 is because I made it crap. That was my self-image. That was my internal dialogue. That was my belief. I self-sabotaged myself left, right, and center. Post 35, it was a whole different game show, right? And it was like, how can I make myself better? How can I better my life? How can I better my mood? What steps do I have to take to get there? So I loved this part of your book. There's so many things about your book that I loved, both times that I've read it, and even just again today when I was going through, making sure I had the notes that I wanted. So when you listen to the ego, you harm your joy. To reclaim your happiness, you must become consciously aware of the manipulative thoughts the ego presents you and decide to let them go. I love that.
Yeah, I was having a conversation with another person today, and she had a really painful experience with her brother, and he was cutting her out of her parents' inheritance. So her parents had just recently passed, and her brother was the executor of the estate, and he made a decision that she just wouldn't get any inheritance. That's crappy, right? That's not a
nice thing.
That's not a nice thing. And this is her brother, and she spent all the holidays with him, and she just went through Thanksgiving, and she didn't have Thanksgiving with him and his family. It's the first Thanksgiving that she's been away from his family, and she just couldn't bear it. And I'm bringing this story up because I said, hey, this is chapter 8 and chapter 9 of the book. I'm like, because I've talked to her about this now for months. And I said, you're suffering because you're listening to your thoughts. Your thoughts are saying he shouldn't have done that. Your thoughts are saying he's greedy, that he's wrong, that all these different words that she's saying about him. And it's only your thoughts that are causing your suffering.
Agreed.
I'm like, would the inheritance be nice? She's like, yeah, I could have paid off my condo. I'm like, cool. However, do you need your condo paid off to be happy today? She's like, no. And I said, okay, so this is, I didn't use the word ego, but in essence, her ego's bruised. That her brother didn't behave the way that she wanted him to behave. She's listening to the thoughts that he's wrong and he should be punished and all these different things that the ego says. But there's one of my other favorite authors is Marianne Williamson. And she always says, only the love between us is real. That's the only thing that's real. Everything else is not real. Only love is real. And she's a Marianne Williamson fan too. And I said, hey, that's a quote from Marianne. So you and your brother, every single Thanksgiving that you can remember, you've been there in his home. There's been so much love between you. That's real. All this stuff that's happening right now, you thinking that he's a dirty, rotten scoundrel.
He is.
That all is not reality. That's your thoughts. And I'm like, right now, you for the last 6 months, disliking him, staying away from him, shunning him, not forgiving him for what he's done, that's creating a ton of suffering.
For her, absolutely.
For her. And I said, if you want to be free of suffering, what we need to do is we need to let go of these thoughts. And the ego is the thinking mind. The ego is the thinking mind. The inheritance, he's going to give that to her or not. She can't control that. She can decide. She can decide to never see him again, to write him out of her life, and to never forgive him. That's definitely a choice that she could make. That's the choice the ego would say to make. It would say, he's not worthy of my forgiveness or my love. He's not worthy of it. What he's done is unforgivable, and I'm not going to forgive him. So now we're withholding love. Well, we look at the progression of moods. The top of the progression of moods is love. And we only get to love if we can totally forgive. And
yes, I have to cut you off just a quick thing.
Go ahead.
Because see, I am on. So I totally get. This is where I have to talk it out loud, and especially for anybody listening. So what her brother is doing to her is wrong. And if there was an inheritance that was in the will from her parents, that was set up, and now all of a sudden he's deciding, nope. So whatever, because I hear about this happening all the time. Anyway, I agree with you that to end her suffering, she has to forgive him 100%. However, I don't know if I agree that because she forgives him, she has to go back and spend every Thanksgiving with her.
Oh no, I don't think that she has to spend every Thanksgiving with him. I think that and she may choose not to. She may choose not to. But what I don't want her to do is there to be a Thanksgiving that she sits there in suffering, like she just went through, because her mind is still trying to make sense of this. Like it's hurting. Her mind is hurting. But what's really hurting her is not that he didn't give her the inheritance. What's hurting her is that she's withholding her love from him.
Okay.
I can, with total forgiveness. So I'm impartial. I don't know him. I know her. I don't want to see her suffering, but I'm not really involved. I'm not one of the family members. I'm just a friend. So it doesn't harm me either way. He doesn't give her the inheritance. All right, big deal. Go make some more money. Like, it doesn't. I could see where if one of my siblings cut me out of the family, that I could make up this big story about how awful it is, right? I could see how I could make up that huge story that she's making up right now. But it really is inconsequential in the grand scheme of life if you can get over it. So how do you get over it? And so chapter 8 says that, okay, we need to end our pride. The ego, the highest emotion of the ego is pride. And it says, I'm right and what you did is wrong. That's pride. I know I'm right. I know you're wrong. You and me, we're sitting here saying, I know that she's right and her brother's wrong. We don't really know that. We don't. We're not actually.
We don't. This is true. What you're saying is true.
Neither does she. She doesn't even know if she's fully right and that he's fully wrong. This is a trick of the mind. So in chapter 8, it talks about, first of all, you ask, is my thought even true? So I would ask her to list her thoughts. And her thought is, my brother shouldn't have done what he did. And I'd say, is that true? He shouldn't have done that. And she would say, yeah, that's totally true. He shouldn't have done that. And then the next question is, and this came from the work of Byron Katie. The next question is, can I absolutely know that what's in the best interest of humanity in the grand scheme of things is for him not to have done what he did and for me not to be going through what I'm going through? The answer is no, I can't absolutely know that. And then we talked about it, and she said, you know what's interesting? I said, you remember in chapter 5 of the book how I had a $180,000 tax bill and we were about to go out of business, and I didn't know how I was going to pay it off, and we didn't have the money. And then what happened is that I had to work at such a ferocious pace that we could just survive and not go out of business. And because of that, we ended up doubling our company in the next year. And then we doubled again the year after that. And we became one of the fastest growing companies in the whole state. Like, do you think maybe God knew what he was doing when he gave me that impossible challenge? I said, now let's put that in your perspective. So yeah, you could have paid off your condo if you had the inheritance, but what could this be doing for you? She's like, well, shoot, man, what if I go ahead and I pay off my condo anyway, but I get so good at what I do that then I have an even more blessed life? I'm like, yeah, what if this is really happening for you? So question 2 is, can I absolutely know that my thought is true? And she can't. She can't absolutely know that it's not the best thing for her brother to have done what he did. That right there starts to shatter the ego. The ego's like, what? I might not even be right? That's crazy.
So
I was certain I was right.
Yes, so I think that that's the context piece I was looking for, right? Is that because for me, I struggled there to reconcile that there could be in any way, shape, or form that was okay. But then we take it outside of the self, outside of us, and we look at the grand scheme of humanity or the universe, and we think, what was this lesson provided to us for? Right?
Or his karma. What's his karma? We don't even know. Maybe his karma was that he needed to do something to fall on his face and learn a really hard lesson about not treating people with enough appreciation, to lose his sister who's always been there for him, to learn I can't keep treating people like this. Maybe the best thing that ever happened to him was making this a-hole move to lose his sister so that he wakes up and becomes a better version of himself. And these are the answers we can't know, but the ego thinks it knows. Like, I'm right and that shouldn't have happened. And once we start to like question, am I really right? What if I'm not? What if this is actually really cool? And then the third question is, who would I be if I could no longer think this thought that he shouldn't have done that? And she's like, well, I would have had the best Thanksgiving. I wouldn't have been there suffering if this thought wasn't there. I would have just loved the people I was with, and my heart would have been full instead of all this worry about not seeing him. I'm like, great. So then we turn it around, and the turnaround is chapter 9. And we take that same thought and we say, what's the opposite? So the thought, he shouldn't have done what he did. The opposite is, he should have done what he did. And then can you come up with some reasons he should have done that? And we already did. One of the reasons is, maybe this is exactly what I need to give me the strength to become a greater version of myself. Maybe this is exactly what he needs so that he can grow and evolve. And now this thought, as soon as we can see the opposite has just as much validity, the whole structure of the ego disintegrates.
I feel like
we're
I
left
can
with at
hear
this point. Oh, go ahead. Go ahead, CK.
I feel like I can hear listeners of different thoughts, and having some are tuning in as I have tuned in and been like, oh, okay, wait, no, I get this. Okay, this makes sense. But I think there's still going to be some that are like, no, the brother's an asshat. He should not have done that. Right? Like, I feel like that's where we're going to be sitting. And I didn't mean to cut you off, but I'm conscientious of the time. I want to stop real quick and say, I read this book and it totally changed my day, but I think also changed my year, because I started to look at things differently. And I started to move out of anger, because there was some anger and some resentment and ego and pride. And I started to move into gratitude, recording my 3 daily wins, grabbing the rope, right? Which I love that story. I love that it resonates with me like so much. God will answer your prayer. Just don't get in your own way, right? And what I love about this book too, and I need to wrap this up because I want people to understand why they need to go out and buy it. And not just them. They need to purchase it for their friends and family. Because I think the book, I said to you in the email, that God is front and center for you in this book as well. But he is not presented in such a way that would be a detraction from the book for atheists or other believers. And when I was reading it, I love me, Jesus. I love God. I'm a gay Christian. Here we are. I know this. I've said it on my podcast before. Whether that makes sense to people, that's not my business, right? It's just between me and God. But so I love that God is part of your journey, and I think you live that. What I like to, when I read a book that brings up God, my first thought is, how will this message sound to a non-believer, an atheist, or an other believer, or things like that? And I just really felt so good that someone who was, say, anti-Christian, if they were, could take this book and take so much from it, and may even minister to them about how good God is, right? And
I appreciate you saying that. Yeah, my nephew read it. He was one of my first readers too. And he's like, and he called me and he said, man, I've got a burning question. He said, do you think I need church to be happy?
mm,
And I said, absolutely not. He said, do you think I need God to be happy? And I said, yes. And I'm like, it doesn't matter what that version is to you. If it's the universe, if it's a higher power, if it's your higher self, if it doesn't matter what, but yes, because without a grounding that this isn't it. If we believe that we go in the dirt and there's just darkness and oblivion and that's it, and that this life is it, and then it's over forever. That's not a truth. And there's too many, and if we, I'm not going to get into it, but there's too much evidence. If you start to collect evidence of people who've died and come back, or children at age 2.5 that remember their past life, that can tell you in straight detail everything about who they were, and then they'll go meet the relatives of the person that they know that they were, and they'll know who they are by name. Like if you start to like actually research how much evidence there is that this isn't it, you'll know there's something bigger than us. And even the greatest scientists of our time, Albert Einstein, saying, the more I learn about science, the more I know that there's a creator. We start to learn there's something bigger than us. That is essential to be happy, because without that, we're fearful and angry all the time. If this life is all I have, and then somebody wrecks my car and I have to walk with a cane, I'm fearful and angry all the time, because this was it. You know, if this is all there is and somebody steals from me or doesn't give me the inheritance that I need, and I might not survive, I have to be angry and resentful for the rest of my life, because this was it. So it is a truth. We cannot actually reach the highest levels of happiness without some form of gratitude to a higher power. And I appreciate you saying that you could read it and feel like it wasn't pushing any religion down your throat, because it's not.
that's always what I'm thinking when I hear God mentioned in a book, is how much of you need to find Christ and commit yourself to the Lord, and all, the hellfire and brimstone sort of type messaging. What I love about the book is that you show such vulnerability in the stories that you've told about yourself, right? Because you used to be mean, mister.
Yeah,
like, it was hard for me to believe, but I was like, that poor secretary, like, oh my
Christina.
gosh.
Yeah,
It
was Christina. She was so sweet too, but yeah, it was really cruel.
But you know what? Like, here we go. But yeah, so it's just that it's really well written. It's really well presented. And if you read it, like, I'm one of those weird people. I literally read books in a day. This one took me, I think, 4.5, 5 hours maybe. And I read really fast. But I went through the whole progression. Like, I just felt anew at the end of the book. I felt uplifted. I felt like I took a lot of things away. And then the part that I have to share this, and it's not for clickbait or anything like that, but when I was done the book, I went and I had a cigarette, because I am a smoker. It's a terrible habit. Anyway, and I come back and I pick up the book and I'm looking at it, and I was like, I flip it back over and I'm like, I wonder what other people thought, or what are they saying. And I read the very first on the back, and no lesson is more important than to learn how to be happy. And then I read the whole thing, of course. And then I read who wrote this. And I have like a moment of like, oh my God, Marianne Williamson has read this book and has endorsed this book. And what I don't think people understand, and I know this for a fact, is that Marianne Williamson is this incredible writer who writes such beautiful things. So much so that Nelson Mandela used a segment of one of her pieces in his 1994 inauguration speech.
Wow.
Repeated again in Aquila the Bee, the movie, And she wrote, "Our deepest fear is not that we are inadequate. Our deepest fear is that we are powerful beyond measure." And it's this
I just got chill bumps as you said that.
and it's literally my, I also have them too. I love that you call them chill bumps, and I'm like goosies because that's what J-Lo calls them, and they're goosebumps when I was growing up. But yeah, so like that was like I already taken so much away from the book and was like writing you this email, and then I see the name and I'm like,
she became a dear friend, and her editor, who edited A Return to Love, was the editor of this book.
and I just love, and that's why I said to you right in the beginning that in that email was that I knew that God was involved in the timing of me reading the book, in us meeting, the connection, all of those things, and exactly what I needed to stop, say, having a pity party while I'm having the best year of my life, and then to realize that I have the power to live in my happiness, right? And to do what's best for me. So, Good Mood Revolution. I can't recommend it enough. Honestly, I bought a copy for my sister because I thought about her a couple times. She's one of the most wonderful human beings that I have ever met in my life. And I love her endlessly, not because she's my sister either, but because she was designed by God, I think, in how, like, you know, you're going to make the sweetest cookie recipe you've ever made and it's going to turn out just perfect.
Yeah.
And be warm and gooey and awesome. That's what happened when God made her.
Oh.
And she's such a Christian. She's one of the few true Christians that I have had the privilege of meeting, you know what I mean? In person. And she has no judgment and she's just love. So I was like, you need to read this book and just take, I think she'll take more from it than I did, maybe. I don't know. But like, I just want her to read this book and see how other people live life in God's love and can use that to help steer their work and their lives and those sort of things. So December 17th, this book will be available. You can pre-order it now. I'm going to put the link. This is a Thursday. It's not Thursday right now, but it's this podcast will be on Thursday, December 5th. So that will give you 12 days. Can we put Matt O'Neill and the Good Mood Revolution on the New York Times #1 best-selling list?
Let's do it.
Can we do that? Can we make that happen? Because if there's a book written in 2024 that needs to be read and the whole world needs to understand how they can choose their happiness, this is that book. And I wish you, Matt, unparalleled success in everything you do. Thank you for appearing back on my podcast to talk about this book. And I just really have a good feeling about it.
Well, you've honored me so much, my man. It means the world, your enthusiasm for the work and all your kind words. Like you couldn't have made me feel any better. My upper limits have just been exceeded.
Ah, perfect. Well, like I said, I'm just happy it was a good book because then I would have had to give you a not so good review.
Oh.
But you know what I mean? Like I'm like, I've read your book. It was nice. Like that's what you would have gotten. Like I'm like, good job. But no, the book resonated with me, as I hope you can tell from it. Like I said, December 17th. I will put the link in the description. Order it today. Send it to all your friends, and let's put Matt O'Neill and Good Mood Revolution on the New York Times #1 best-selling list. I've spoken it into existence. That's what's going to happen.
I'll take it.
There we go. Until next time, everybody, thanks for tuning in and get out there and live your wildest dreams. Thanks for being here today, Matt.
See you, CK.
For media and sponsorship inquiries, email info@cksims.com or visit cksims.com and fill out the contact form. Be sure to subscribe so you don't miss an episode. A new episode airs every Saturday. CKS Media.